Welcome to the old young ones, where we are not going through a time warp after 20 minutes of other things. I am your host, John Clark. With me, as always, is Howie Weingarten. How are you,
Hey, how you doing?
Howie?
Ah!
You have no volume control over there, do you?
No. Can you hear me now?
Well, we are talking about the
Can
episode
you?
Time.
Am I legible?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. But we're talking about the episode Time, which is the fourth episode of season 2. We're coming around the horn now. We're gonna run out
Getting
of
close. Getting close.
very soon. But I'm really happy about this because Time is something that is number one of its time, and number two comments on history of television at the moment, and that's why Wally Podrazik is here.
Yay, Wally!
Wally is a good friend of the Caffeinated Comics podcast. He is the adjunct lecturer at the University of Illinois in Chicago, and he is the author of Watching TV, which is going into its fourth print.
Fourth edition.
Mm-hmm. Of being updated.
It is now it'll be about 500,000 words.
Wow. How many pages?
600 plus.
Wow.
Whoa, nice.
It's kind of like the old Leonard Maltin.
Exactly. Except now, I don't want to scare people away. We've designed it so you can read it season by season, because it's a season by season story of television, and you can choose any chapter, any of the 85 chapters, without looking at any of the others, and read that and have a entertaining visit to the story of television.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. I was Matt. You showed me the third edition, so I'm really looking forward to the fourth. As you said, is up to the minute of when it has to go to press. But we are talking about Time, and starting with this episode, we have another unique opening. We talked about this at Nasty, where it was like the Hammer horror type of opening, and in Time, they're taking direct aim at the competition of that moment. It's a parody of Dallas and Dynasty.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize would be a thing in England at that time. Were those international?
They were an international sensation, and I was thinking, actually, I also have a great interest in Beatles history. So when I was watching the beginning of their parody of Dallas and listening to the music, I was saying, see, that's how you parody but not steal. You're
correct,
close enough that it evokes what you're.
People know exactly what you're going for.
But well, if I may just jump right in, because
go right ahead,
please do.
It captures the visual flow of Dallas opening credits at the time.
Oh yeah,
sweeping scenes. Now, not quite as upscale as the Dallas world.
Not nearly.
No.
As upscale as an episode of Flying Circus, because they shot that part on film.
Yes.
And the only part.
Yes. What was really striking, though, is you could tell people who are absolute pros and fans of the media that they are making fun of, because they have it down to the last breath. They have it like that is an appropriate setting for what they're making fun of. There's one moment fairly early on in the parody in which character enters the executive room for E.T.
Yes.
E.T. Fairfax.
Yes. No, not the movie.
Well, I love their terrible American accents.
Those are the best.
I always get a kick out of British people they hit the R's too hard, where he's like, no, not the film, your boss.
I love it when he's just like, I've just received this memo.
Yes.
Because it's like,
I thought that had to be deliberate. It couldn't be.
Yes.
Oh my God, yeah.
In any case, so they get the back of the chair of the head of the oil company,
yes,
and then he makes that dramatic turn, which is absolutely in the rhythm of the Dallas approach to storytelling and the Dynasty. They have an explicit reference to Dynasty by having Alexei Sale as Joan
Collins. Yeah,
pouring champagne on his chest with a surly face
while he's wearing garters and thigh highs.
Yeah,
not bad, Alexei, not bad.
But the thing is that even while doing the broad stroke, that actually works decades later.
Yeah.
I mean, you could ignore all of these shot by shot tributes that they might be doing and say, forget all that. It's slapstick. It's silly. It's truly goofy.
Yeah.
And
There's a lot of boob jokes up front.
and in the back, as a matter of
And
fact.
in the back,
Exactly.
with the dumb tits in the back, or whatever, the boobs or whatever they say.
But if you're there, you know what we're talking about.
And Snuggles as himself. I love, you got to throw the dog in who got shot.
But what they do is say, all right, one of the central conflicts in Dallas was the idealistic Bobby Ewing and the rapacious J.R. Ewing. And so you have Neil saying, I'm giving it all away. We're going to charge 2p for each gallon of petrol. Right. We're going to give money to anyone who deserves it.
Anyone nice,
you can find.
Anyone who's nice. And it sort of underscores that they have this tension that they set up in Dallas of a good Bobby versus bad JR.
Yeah.
But come on, if they were successful, Bobby wasn't that good. And JR wasn't that totally evil. Because they were able to make themselves a good fortune, and also, it's just also fun to see them making fun of the true attractions of those series, which would be, frankly, the handsome guys and the beautiful women,
right?
Because the stories, okay, fine. The stories actually, there's sometimes as much sensible, coherent, linear plot in an episode of Dallas or Dynasty as there is an episode of The Young Ones. So what about this? What about that? Okay, well, that's good for the network promo. Now let's go back to what's happening. And what's happening here is posturing and glaring and what have you. And so there's this one freeze frame in the Young Ones parody where like the smiling beauty and the teeth are glistening and it's like she's gorgeous and she knows it. And you know what? We know it too. So they couldn't have sustained it too much longer. And then you wake up and it was a fantasy. But that doesn't mean it's that much different from the rest of the episode because it's jump to jump to jump to jump to jump. And along the way, you have to say, take me somewhere because I can't plot this one out.
Well, it takes that left turn. I think because it's Neil's fantasy, it takes that left turn into hippieism because Rick comes in really angry about all of this and then immediately turns and he's like, I have to take this suit off before I turn into a computer. And then he's completely on board with it. This is also the only time, one of the only times you see Neil with marijuana. Like usually he's just kind of put upon and
that was one hell of a joint.
Yeah,
that was a big fucking doobie.
Yeah,
my wife will make fun of me for saying doobie.
But, it depends if you like soup or not.
Reefer.
It was explicitly saying that this is what we do because we are college kids or faux college kids or the right age and we should be out of college kids.
Right.
And this is the goofy stuff that we do. And there are so many moments that you say, where did this come from? But I want to do a little sidebar first in terms of the era, because I was thinking about why did this feel so comfortable? And I started looking at not the exact year, but that's the time of like Rock Follies, for instance, where you had the three women who were in the rock band and their adventures. And again, in Britain, same type of thing. I think it was about 12 episodes or so. And and there was also stateside, not quite then, but late 80s, something called The Housewives, which was, again, that type of broad humor, satirical, and had Maggie Mayle and Hope Juber. Hope Juber, daughter of Sherwood Schwartz, who did Gilligan's Island. So, and I looked up some of those and the year's about right. And the sensibility is about right. Because it's all, we're going to do this because we want to. We're the domesticated pride people and all. So they are making fun of what they're doing, but embracing what they're doing. And so that really came through in this episode of the Young Ones. Is like, for instance, I wake up with a beautiful woman next to me. Wow. How'd I do that?
Yeah, just the noise he makes, because we go from
Right.
the fantasy into Rick's woken up by Vivian, who, by the way, that line reading of "Shut up, you bastard" always echoes with me, because Primus actually sampled it on their biggest albums, Sailing Seas of Cheese, the one that had Tommy the Cat and Jerry was a race car driver. The last track on that was just them playing it and different sound bites from the Young Ones. And "Shut up, you bastard" was the chorus. And their friend, and Howie and I, at the time, we had a mutual friend that was a big Primus fan, so he played it for us against our will many, many, many nights. But we go right from that to Rick with Jennifer Saunders, who becomes a force of comedy. So one of the things I love about the Young Ones is how it touches on really all the important players in early 80s comedy as well. But that noise he makes when he realizes with the beautiful woman is like, it's so depraved.
He's shocked. He is shocked that he's in bed with a woman.
Yes.
I mean, we're shocked. We're revolted, because when he climbs down those sheets and you see what you were like, oh my God, and you look at Jennifer Saunders, obviously an attractive woman. You're like, what the fuck is she doing in bed with Rick?
Right. Well, that would be what you would be saying, not in so many words, a little bit later in the episode.
Exactly.
Yeah, basically, But it's funny, Wally, just one point. It's just like, just getting back to the opening very briefly.
Yeah.
It's just, I remember back then at that time that the Who Shot JR phenomenon, I remember taking a media class. That thing was like worldwide. I mean, like all these. So the fact that they actually did their own thing on Dallas Dynasty is like, I mean, they really hit it like right on. And my favorite thing, getting back to Rick Mayo, before we get back to him in bed with Jennifer Saunders, is when he says, it's cost us $6 million. Just that hand gesture that he just like, but anyway, back to the bedroom.
Yeah,
one fantasy ends and another fantasy begins.
Yeah. By the way, back to Dallas one more time. In that the fact that the Bobby character falls into the swimming pool and all, right at the opening credits. I mean, that's just alluding to there's a dead body in the swimming pool, and Bobby was almost. They are so aware of the conventions of the broad soap opera, which needs dramatic moments, but doesn't need too many of them, and certainly doesn't need a coherent story.
Well, it just needs sensationalism, and that's
sensationalism,
early 80s version of sensationalism.
Yeah,
and it was sensational.
Yeah, and at that time, I mean, I was probably about 8 when Shit JR happened, but when they were going to reveal it, I remember watching it because everyone was watching it. I didn't know what was going on. That was like, I remember that whole episode is JR in the operating room. And I'm like, well, you going to tell me or you're not going to tell me?
We'll tell you in good time.
Yeah, we'll wait till the end of the episode.
Yeah.
When we do our Dallas podcast.
It's the opposite of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, where they opened and closed.
Yeah, exactly.
Made us wait.
We're going to tease you. But I'm Not a Virgin was sort of the other sub-thread throughout this particular episode.
This one is very, very adolescent.
Very sexual.
It was
very sexually like what you were saying,
but sexually adolescent. It wasn't. It wasn't knowledgeable sex.
They're like, tell us what it was like. They were just kind of like, well, you're college students. You should know what this is like. Come on.
Yeah, they're all virgins. Well, there's a joke in the episode before in Nasty where Alexi Sale plays the vampire, and Vivian says vampires only bite virgins, and they're all very nervous. Yes, so it's definitely an undercurrent that none of them. It's funny. It reminded me of again, because we came to it in the 90s, so some of my references are. But there's a lot of Beavis and Butthead in Rick and Vivian, especially in this episode.
Oh my God! Like very Muppet Show, very just kind of like like things just dropping through the ceiling, just like
literally dropping through the
literally.
Yeah.
It just like it was. I mean, it was like I'm. At some points, I'm like, is this one of the most chaotic episodes that there is? With the two of them just beating each other up, pulling out howitzers, and just like just going just.
That's much later in the episode, but
bonkers.
I do love that line, Vivian. Where did you get that howitzer? I found it. We'll put it back where you found it.
You know,
That's all the explanation.
You know.
That this cannon gets in the hallway.
you know.
But then we're sort of cheating by jumping towards the end.
We are.
But in that, you're looking at the clock because you wouldn't have been doing it back then. But you're looking at, well, wait, there's still another 10 minutes. Where are they going to go with this? Well, we're going to go through space and time.
Yes.
and
we'll get to that because that is one of the most understated and shocking turns. And the episode is called Time. But and we've talked about this in other episodes where some episodes feel like a sketch show. And this episode definitely has that. We're going to get to things like the light bulb section. Dawn French is the Easter Bunny. These are self-contained scenes that don't move the plot anywhere. And then there's other episodes that feel like they're two 15-minute episodes put together as if they were
Bambi.
Bambi is the perfect example. As if they were a SpongeBob and they had one 11-minute one and another 11-minute one.
Right.
This, I feel like, kind of stays on track until it gets bored with it.
Well, and even then, the going off track it's very Python in the sense of you'll hear something on the radio which becomes the transition.
The one difference is when they actually do Python, because that comes out of nowhere, where Lexi Sale and Rick Mail start the cheese shop sketch, but then he says no, and they abandon it, and they go right back. Rick actually repeats the line that got cut off before.
I love that. I absolutely love that because it's almost like the whole thing with Dawn French with the Easter Bunny.
Yeah.
Where do you really go with that? There's not a lot you can do, but it's funny as fuck.
It's not.
So the thing is, it's just like,
long.
Let's get it in there somehow, some way. And it'll it's really just going to fuck with everyone's mind.
And that's
what this show is the best. The show does that better than any show, I think. It fucks with your mind.
Both Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders appear in other episodes, but this is the only one. They're not together, but they're in the same episode, which this predates French and Saunders.
Sure.
It's really nice to see. Again, it's like we're Young Ones is such a touch point for where the old comedy movement was. It gave a lot of people their first appearance on television, and then they all went on to do all of these other things.
But
like I said, did not hesitate to reach back and say, "Hey, come on over and do a cameo on my show."
Yes,
that's brilliant.
And of course, Jennifer Saunders and Adrian Edmondson
are
married. They were married at the time, still married today.
Still married.
And I do like that because when they come down, he's right in her chest. And I was like,
he's just
any of them is allowed.
It's him.
It should be her husband.
It should be her husband or future husband at that point.
Yeah, but
and there's so many moments when
I love them as a couple.
Yes. Is Helen? Well, luckily my last name isn't Back. It's Mucus.
Yes.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah,
that's much better.
It's
very Young Ones to go to like just go. You know what? Disgusting turn.
We're just gonna do it.
I do love
out there. Don't care.
So offhanded. She makes you wait. She takes that beat.
Well, and actually, that's what was most impressive about her. Actually, is very disciplined.
Yeah.
I mean, they're tearing up the scenery, and she's just there, quietly taking out the killer knife that she's about to use to possibly create mayhem in their lives.
Yeah. Well, she understands that her character is so crazy. And everyone's crazy around her that the calm center is that contrast.
Yeah. She's the calm. Mike is talking about Trevor in the bin.
That's a whole sketch, really.
Yeah. That's great, but and Rick is dying to tell anyone who will listen that he's slept with a woman.
Well, he takes a coffee mug and smashes it, so they don't have.
But we need 4 mugs. Well, we really need 5. I guess why do we need that extra mug?
Well, because of Trevor. That's the side
track. Trevor, And then what I love is that like the one guy who I could probably see getting laid out of most of them, probably Neil, because maybe he's got some sort of sensitivity to him
Well, he also
women
hangs
would
out
be,
with other hippies. So
and he also hangs out with hippies and stuff like that. But he's just like, so what was it like?
oh, he's really horny in this
You
too.
know?
He's
Tell
like,
me.
yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
I don't know if he was goading him.
And he's like, well, no.
No. And in a way, it was just like, actually, you know what? I don't think he really does know. I thought he knew, but then after though, he's like, wait a minute.
And
He
again,
doesn't know.
that takes us back to Python. Did she come?
Oh, yeah.
Did she go?
Yeah,
Did
yeah.
she go?
Nudge, nudge.
It's a touch, nudge, nudge. What's
Say no more, say no more.
Because that was the punchline for Python, which is after having all of this sexual innuendo, then what's it like? As if you, the all-knowing, really aren't the all-knowing.
And I do love. This season's really good about having like little bits of business for them all to do. And I love like the contrasting stories because Mike got the thing with Trevor. I love Vivian's subplot in the beginning of this of like his Muppet-sized hangover, where he's got
the dynamite on his head. He's like blowing his up his
worse.
It's just like, and how do you get rid of a hangover?
What's a good thing for a hangover?
Drinking heavily the night before.
I love that joke.
That's a great line.
Yeah,
that is a great line.
So they all have.
And then Vivian throws up. Of all this chaos is going on, Trevor and Rick trying to think, and Neil all horny, and you got Jennifer Saunders as kind of like the straight lady person, whatever. The thing is that it's just kind of like in all this chaos, as you guys said, she's now the one like stable factor, but really completely unstable.
Yeah, there's no
she's
stable factor.
Unstable.
And speaking of unstable, so to speak, I was talking about the Python use of radio for transition, where you have the radio playing Captain Blood radio, describing the newsflash about the mysterious, murderous female killer. But one of my favorite parts about that is suddenly their world goes sideways because, of course, Neil is shaking the radio.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they must be
Robbie Coltrane.
And so if he's doing this to the radio, then their world goes sideways as well.
And there's so many sidetracks on that because you're right. It's a cutaway to it's basically making fun of pirate radio at the time, which was a big thing in England. But they
used a pirate.
They're actually on a pirate ship, but the whole sketch is just
Robbie Coltrane. It was great.
Yeah, Robbie Coltrane appearing again. I think this is his third appearance.
Of
course, most well known for Hagrid. Much later, but he was also in the Pierce Brosnan, James Bonds, and he was a big part of the Blackadder Christmas Carol.
Yep.
But the whole sketch is about that he's blind. It's not about pirates doing a radio station. It's that he's a Cyclops with an eye patch, but then he takes the eye patch
over his only eye.
Yes, and he's still blind, and it's all the jokes are about him being blind. I'm like, well, we've taken 3 different turns to get to this premise.
Or as he said, aye, sir. Are you insulting me?
He goes, yes, he'll regret the day he came to see. See? What do you mean see?
What do you mean see?
Well, in any case, it is, I won't say, well, it is nonstop, but the childishness of the sexualness is just, well, it is floor smashing. I'm still trying to figure out what they were doing or trying to do up in that bed when the bed came through the ceiling.
They showed they were
pillow fighting, right?
They were pillow fighting. They were chasing each other. Vivian jumps on Rick in the bed. Like I said, childish. That's what 7-year-olds would do. But then
they're basically 7-year-olds.
Yeah, because of the show, the whole bed drops down, which gets an applause break.
Yeah, Bob loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see, I was just rewatching it before the recording just to see anything I missed, and you can see they're tucked into the bed because they know how hard it's going to hit. Yeah. And Rick and Aid were, they were professional slapstick clowns, and they
hurt each other once in a while.
And once in a while, I mean, but they would do things like,
but they went the extra yard.
They would tour with Bottom, and they would hit each other every night on stage.
Put each other in the hospital.
Yeah, their earliest characters
stories I've heard. Yeah,
were the Dangerous Brothers. They were two stuntmen.
Yeah,
so they were very, very good at slapstick. And one of the things I love about the young ones is that it has all these different voices. Because we'll talk about Bottom, which is the show Rick and Abe did in the 90s. It's also very good, but it's just them. So it's just a slapstick show. It doesn't have these other facets that, like, you know, of Ben Elton writing and bands coming in and puppets and verbal.
Some pretty bad puppets. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
love that. The worse the puppets are, the better. By the way, if I would have done a shot for every time that Neil gets hit in the show, I would have been drunk at the end of the show. He gets pummeled in this fucking show.
That's a good point, because as much as we're talking about
really gets
between
pummeled.
Rick and Abe, yeah, Neil gets hit a lot.
A lot.
Well, there's that hit. It's much, much later in the episode when we do the time travel, when the knight hits him and he just looks at the camera.
You know, he gets hit by the radio.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you can see when they pick up the radio. Originally, it squishes. And I was like, oh, somebody's going to get hit with that. Because it's clearly just made out of foam.
Clearly the glasses are breakable. For stunt hits, because if there's a glass and he's standing there, okay, well, that took care of that glass.
And,
and as much as it stays in this course of this juvenile, adolescent, a horniness, they have another sidetrack where they break a light bulb, and now there's 5 minutes about changing a light bulb, which is, again, a completely self-contained sketch. In the middle of it, they put the band, but
how many guys does it take to change a light bulb?
Exactly.
Me.
Well, I'm the only one who does anything.
He's not the only one who does anything around it, which he's right.
Yeah,
he's right. I mean, Mike for this episode, he's basically on the couch being suffocated by Jennifer Saunders.
But he likes it. He goes, yeah.
But he's really into it. Hey,
yeah.
You know what? God bless him. The thing is that, like, it's just like there's just lunacy going on in this episode, and the funny thing is that, like, John and I watched this episode when I was in Chicago.
Yeah, we watched it together,
and we were just kind of like, okay, well, maybe this is that episode out of the 6 that is just kind of like, but when I watched it again, I'm like, you know what, there's no episode of the young ones that I would call bad. There's episodes that I would call stronger. This one has a lot of jokes in it, like, that are just, like, for me, like, under the radar, because all of a sudden it's just like I'm a big fan of SPG, and all of a sudden it was just like he pops out for like 4 seconds. He's like, oh, no, I'm a Glaswegian, and I forgot what the joke was, but I'm like, oh shit, there's SPG. There's the light bulb walking out the door, and then of course there's a band that comes in that when they're done, Vivian's like, okay, we need you to leave.
Yeah, and by the way, when that band comes on, the bands are a wide range, and of course, the famous story is the bands are only there to increase the budget of the show, to turn it into a variety show. But every time I watch this band, I go, boy, if you think you were sick of ska in the late 90s, like, by the end of this song, you'll be sick of ska in the early 80s.
I kind of tapped out when they were on. I'm gonna be honest.
I like them, so I'll just be the lone voice. But I'm not buying their album.
I'm not sure I have that album.
To illustrate how quickly they turn. It's I even wrote it down. Okay, what about Amazula? And it's just like, okay, boom. Here's the performance.
Here's the band.
So, ladies and gentlemen.
No, they never do. My favorite is in Bambi, they introduced Motorhead, which is probably the best known band in the entire series. And Mike just looks at the camera and says music, and they run off the set. And I love that the band's just always in the house.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
I'm glad that, I can't always say that I loved every band that they had on there. I can't. That would be a lie. But and they're sometimes sometimes people will argue about, oh well, you know what, I had to skip the Alexi Sale part. For me, I sometimes tend to usually kind of not tap out, but zone out. Let's say zone
Catch
out.
your breath.
Yeah, when the band is on, except for Motorhead.
Okay.
Except for Motorhead.
I do like, as you're saying, Wally, putting it in a place and time. You know, music is so based in trend and fashion that it really puts a stamp on the era that it's made. When you get bands you've never heard of, there are bands like 9 Below Zero that I've only ever seen on the Young Ones, and I've never seen anywhere else. But then there's Dexy's Midnight Runners comes on, a famous one-hit wonder that comes on and does not play their hit. They come on and they do a Van Morrison cover.
Van Morrison, that's right.
Yeah, they do Jackie Wilson set, and every time I watch it, I'm like, why don't you
did they do this? They should, come on, Eileen.
Yeah, Motorhead does Ace of Spades. Madness does Our House.
Madness.
Well, one of the you guys alluded to that this is coming to the end of the arc, so to speak. And I was wondering, looking at the episode, is this, look, we're almost done, so we can do any damn thing we want, and so this is going to be particularly indulgent to weave in the types of skits, allusions, references, settings that we feel like doing now. We want to make sure we get these into the hopper before our opportunities are gone. So in that sense, I would say it's strong, but strong because it's ballsy. You know, it's like, we want to do this. You don't like it? Too bad. Go take a walk.
You know.
Yeah, and speaking of how quickly things turn and things they don't want to do, is we build up the whole plot is about Jennifer Saunders being this murderer, but then she just walks by the door and she's crushed by the door because a horse is there. But she shows up later.
Yeah, right. But
the story, that's the end of that plot.
Of that thread, yeah. But then the door coming down on her then alludes to the first one to find the prize in the cornflakes takes off all their clothes. The prize was a horse. The horse has just come through the door.
Oh, wow.
So
that's as much of a connection as you're going to get.
I did not notice the horse and the horse, of course. But
you don't collect cornflakes prizes because you've never
not anymore
your cornflakes box. Totally,
that was the best.
I do love going back to that.
That was the best.
He just Mike just pours all the cornflakes in front of her on the table.
You know,
it's very in line with like how the caveman approach.
And he's just like, honey, he says something along the lines is like, I'm going to be talking about something. He goes, and I'm not talking in centimeters either.
Yeah, it says, when I tell you how big it is, you're going to think it's in centimeters. I love the fact that Mike is blatantly hitting on her, even though Rick has said that she's with him. First of all, no one believes
Doesn't matter.
Well, no one believes that, right?
Yeah, second of all, he's just right at it.
Did you? I mean, she's cute. I mean, she's adorable. She's like that girl next door, you know. Like I said before, all due respect, the hell she doing in bed with Rick, you know?
Well, she's a serial killer that's hiding
apparently she snuck in. Victims. Yeah. Apparently she snuck in and she's like next to and then it's just like he's just with Vivian, he's like, you're still a virgin.
Well,
in case you didn't get that point, let's have a little sign.
You know? And he's gonna have a T-shirt made up the next day.
That shows that Vivian won the fight.
You know, he gives him 59 pence or pounds or something, whatever. You know.
Well, and that's something in the beginning because Jennifer Saunders says that Helen Mucus says that she snuck into their house when no one was home, and I always thought because when they wake up, Vivian's has a hangover. Rick doesn't know what happened the night before. Rick said that was some party. And I was thinking, wow, their parties must have gotten better because there's an episode in the first season called Interesting where they have a terrible party where everyone's bored until it breaks out in a riot. And I was like, wait, they're more popular. Wait, they're being invited to parties? Because then she says that no one was home. And I was like, who had a party and let the four of them in?
Well, yeah, I couldn't figure out why no one was home, or maybe no one was in the bedroom, because I didn't believe for 1 minute they had a party.
No, well, Vivian was hungover. That was the only proof that I.
You don't need a party to get hungover.
No, I know by experience. You know, and the funny thing is that like Neil says to Rick, "Wait a minute, you were passed out after a half glass of cider."
Yeah.
You know, and I was thinking to myself, well, there's both non-alcoholic and there can be alcoholic cider.
That's a good point.
You know,
might not even been alcoholic.
This is like, you know, and now he's saying that, you know, he's you know, he's you know, wetting his dipstick. You know what I'm saying? That it's just
you know,
no one wants to believe him.
It reminds me of a joke related because it comes from Absolutely Fabulous, which is a Jennifer Saunders show.
Beautiful show.
Remember her daughter was very nerdy and introverted, and there's an episode where she brings her friends over and they're all trying to be cool, and one of her friends said, "Last night we were drinking. I had a whole can." And that line has always stuck with me. A whole can.
My God.
And that's what when you said half a glass of cider, I'm like, you know what? That's probably a joke that they just kept playing around with.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, they found the right delivery for it.
We found it, you know.
So when the horse comes in, we're now in time travel.
Now we get the true time travel part.
Blase time travel. I mean, granted, this is not a science fiction show, but it's on the BBC. Doctor Who's been on for 15 years at this point. It's like they could have done some kind of special effect. Not at all. And this is the kind of show where if a knight walks in, I don't automatically think that they traveled in time.
No, not at all. I love when the guy says the three like I guess feudal serfs or whatever they were are sitting around. He goes, "I'll bet you a pence that I can make my 2 legs fall off," and he just like wiggles his legs. He's just like, damn,
that joke goes nowhere.
I know, but it's brilliant.
I'm like, okay, there's this
brilliant
setup,
because it goes nowhere.
It really does.
It does,
and that's when I really got the double dose of Monty Python and Holy Grail when they sort of smashed the timeline at the end of that movie, but also when you are with the peasants in that film. The peasants are peasants, basically.
Yeah. It's the Bring Out Your Dead sketch.
Yeah. And so I was also thinking about SCTV, which in terms of rhythmically, I was trying to get the timeline straight as to if there was back and forth borrowing, but let's just say it's from the same spirit.
Yeah, they're both on at that point.
Yeah, where you say that blowed up real good.
Oh yeah, John Candy and Eugene Levy.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. And so when we get to what I guess is the past, they blowed up real good.
That was a big explosion. I feel like a lot of budget for that show had to go into that explosion, which you just explained.
That was filmed, that was filmed too.
That was also filmed.
Because I know I said at the beginning that they used film for the opening. They did use film for this.
Yeah.
Now it was a very BBC thing to like if you left the studio, you went to film, but if you were on the soundstage, it was videotape. I mean, Monty Python's the perfect example, but Doctor Who would do that. You know,
all the time. Yeah.
You'd come out of the TARDIS and be on film, and he'd go into a space station and it would be on videotape.
Okay.
And so once you've gone through that time door, then where do you go from there? And besides their encounter with the peasants, then you have the game show.
Right, which is breaking the rules of the time travel immediately.
Especially
there's a televised audience show,
and the audience are dressed in modern clothing.
Yes,
but the contestant is some guy who looks like he's had the plague,
or
know somebody who has had the plague.
Yeah,
and Lexi Sale starts that in modern dress because he's talking about what's coming on ITV and Channel 4.
Did you see?
But then they raise the curtain and he puts on the jester.
The jesters.
So really, the only time travel element is the contestant.
But yeah,
and and so, but of course, the young ones are aware that there's some kind of time travel situation involved, because that's what they describe the hordes coming to their door as being from
Oh,
other era.
Wally. That's
Yeah,
one of
well,
my
didn't-
favorite lines. One of my favorite lines. I'll be quick. Mike says, Neil, did you upset the neighbors? He's like, no, I blew them up. Which is just like, it's just like, all of a sudden he's a sorcerer and stuff like that. He's a hippie. And he's with a hippie knight, who, by the way, for a hippie knight, still hits the guy in the head. It's just kind of like, okay.
With flowers. He's
With
got flowers.
okay,
I was on
that's
his
true.
lance. Yes, and if he
It was
slayed a
on the
dragon,
lance.
he would try to think of it from the dragon's point of view.
Which
I love that joke.
If you want to go political for a moment,
I love that joke.
I mean, that is the type of approach of saying, all right, if we're unhappy with the political situation, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you do the hippie? Well, we'll try to see it from their point of view, the dragon's point of view, or do we do something? Actually, I guess they don't do anything, but it does raise the issues.
Yeah, but that is the we talk about this a lot on the show, that it's I call it the world's first punk sitcom, because it's thumbing its nose at authority. It hits loud, it hits fast, and it's out really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it has that punk sensibility all throughout. And it's always interesting to see what they respect and what they don't, because they do a lot of trashing television. What it like, clearly they don't respect Dynasty and they don't respect Dallas.
Yes.
But when they do the cheese shop sketch, they're not attacking Python.
No,
that's an homage. Like you can see there's clear respect for Python where there is not for Dallas.
Right.
So, and it that clearly comes from a personal vision and a personality writing that, rather than like a demographic.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I mean, when they do that short sketch with Mayol and Sale, I mean, that's a love note to Python. A lot of this episode is a love note to Python. And the thing is that like you sometimes, what do they say? The greatest imitation, or the greatest form of flattery, is imitation. You know. Now, and this is imitation where you're imitating it, and it is purely like, you guys are the the top of the creme de la creme of comedy, whereas you look at Dallas and Dynasty, and for what they represent, that materialism, they represent that Americanism, that just kind of like all those women who starred in the show, Victorian principles and all those
you're doing a wordplay there.
Yeah, for sure they were. Definitely. The thing is that like they're making fun of a lot of these values that across the pond people may look at and be like, that's the way they think over there down in Texas, and oils and stuff. It's like, and I get it. Because look, I mean, it's coming from, I think they were from Bristol, England, is a lot different from being in Dallas, Texas.
Well, and it's also what is the culture that America is sending out at the time? If Dallas and Dynasty are these international hits, is that what's thought that America is at that moment?
And Alexei Sayle was a socialist comedian, and Dallas is a very capitalism kind of thing. So, look, everyone, no one's a sacred cow. Everyone can get made fun of. So,
going down to the sensibilities of the time, in the past, wherever that past is, when the peasants are being tried and in the game show and such. First of all, I had to laugh out loud. We'll be back after this break.
Oh my God, yes.
But the more, let's call it a sobering moment. What was your crime? My crime was whistling on a Tuesday.
I love that joke.
And it's just such arbitrary punishment for innocent act,
Right.
seemingly
Right.
innocent act. And if you're making a point about how heartless and, or at least how impossible to justify some of these actions are, that's a good line.
Yeah.
That's a good line. Saying, well,
Yeah.
okay, you're dead. So,
You know?
Yeah, it definitely fits. What and another thing I keep thinking of in this time travel setting,
mhm,
as you said, Wally, there's a lot of Holy Grail, and you can see the
mhm.
respect they have for Python, but also placing it in the time. We're going to we go from here. Ben Elton goes into Blackadder 2.
Oh, sure.
Blackadder
Okay.
1's been produced by Richard Curtis and Rowan Atkinson, but Ben
Mhm.
Elton's not a part of it. We had in another episode, we had like there's a sketch about uh, criminals being shipped off to Australia, and they're on a dock, and I feel like there maybe it's just kind of rattling in the back of their head. It's an influence, or maybe they're preparing for it, but it feels like Ben Elton's starting to write historical sketches and
Mhm,
getting a feel for it before they write the Elizabethan time of Blackadder too.
mhm.
So in
Mm.
some ways it's influenced by what came before, but in some ways it's preparing for what comes next.
That's a very astute observation because the thing is that when you think of the first Blackadder series, I mean, that first season is a little difficult to watch. There's a lot of medieval stuff that goes on. Even in this one, there's nothing. It's very very medieval light, if I might
Mhm.
say. But the thing is that like there are different things like with the medieval torture and the stuff like that, and joking about the plague and whistling on a Tuesday. You know, it's kind of like yeah, it's I I I actually didn't think about the timeline between that first season of Blackadder
Mhm.
and this episode. That's actually a very astute observation. And it's weird because like if you go from almost like a religious thing as well. If I remember back in the day, there was one thing about the you know, do you go rescue a sheep that's fallen into a pit, and do you do that on the Sabbath, or do you wait till the Sabbath's over? And it's like it's almost like the thing is that like with the guy whistling on a Tuesday, it's almost like it's such an innocuous thought of like, well, why wouldn't you?
Mhm.
Along with that thing that from the New Testament back then, Christian Judeo Christian teaching, right? The thing is that like it's kind of like there's a point of just how depraved life and human thinking, even worse, can be when you look at it from medieval standard.
Right, and that's the
Oh,
prism, as you said, Wally. They're looking at that kind of barbarism
Right.
through the lens of the barbarism of Thatcher's England. And
and I also couldn't help but think about Elvis Costello as well.
mm,
I mean that's the era again, roughly.
yeah,
That's the era of the songs like "Pills and
Hmm.
Soap," and it's a very anti-war,
Right.
anti-Thatcherism, anti how can well um, uh, let's see, what is it? I can't wait till I could tamp down the dirt on your grave.
oh yeah, yeah.
Basically,
That's well, being a Beatle fan, that comes from Spike,
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
the album Paul McCartney had a hand in.
yeah. And
Yeah,
again, that's pushing the whole sense because Costello was also coming out of doing things like country music and all,
right.
which I love, by the way. I love his performances, but it's like, okay, I could do that. I could do symphonic, and I could still
Hmm.
be gritty.
Yeah,
And I
Right.
think what I see in the young ones is we're funny. We know how to be damn funny, but we still want to have some cred, so to speak. Not for the audience, but for ourselves.
yeah,
That,
yeah.
that we want to make our statement.
I think
Hmm.
Elvis Costello is a great comparison to make. Not
That's a
only
great
because I'm a
comparison. Yeah.
huge Elvis Costello fan, but Elvis Costello was like the angry guy who's too smart for his own good. So he wasn't the Joe Strummer that was a hammer. He
Yeah,
was a screwdriver that was slowly unscrewing, the support
yeah,
of the machine.
yeah.
Hmm.
And I feel Ben Elton definitely feels like that. Like because Blackadder gains that sensibility. Like as you said, Howie, that first season is a little two-dimensional. And it's just Richard Curtis, and Richard Curtis was not the Richard Curtis he became, the king of the rom-com in the mid-90s. But and it's good, but Ben Elton really has that like smart satiric edge that is a lot in the young ones, as we said. It's not in things like Bottom, and it's not in things like the first season of Blackadder. It's that sensibility, which again places it very, very deeply in early 80s Britain.
And that's the thing also with Blackadder. It's just the first season of obviously is the foundation. It becomes this is how we're gonna build, and they build by developing the characters, and they Curtis and Elton are a wonderful team. And when you look at Mayall and Lise Mayer and Ben Elton, another just wonderful team. I mean, they're at the top of their games. And the funny thing is that and then I'm probably going to pivot here a little bit. The funny thing is like when you talk about like taking the screws to everything, all of a sudden they're coming to the climax of this show where like everyone's attacking the house. God bless you, is surrounded by by things. It's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, who cares?
And that was my last bit. That's how the show ends. I want to get everyone's take on why. And we've had a lot of episodes where they've just abandoned the plot.
I love that.
But they do it in 2 words.
Yeah, and I echo Howie. It is. I love that. That's again one of my little scrawls here. It says, "Well, what are you going to do? Who cares?" And then they're surrounded. They're invaded. The house is invaded. Yeah. But they're watching TV too. So
are they playing cards or something? Watch TV. The guy comes in with a bow and hits Neil in the head with it, and Neil's just like, "Whatever."
Yeah, and
I've been hit so many times this episode. I don't care anymore.
It's like the early seasons.
No one cares.
Park. It's like you killed Kenny. It doesn't matter how many times you kill Kenny. He's back next week because it's artificial. I feel like when jokes like that are just pointing out that like nothing matters in a sitcom. There's no reason to get attached to the character. There's no reason to follow the plot. It's like it's over because this is actually a fairly long one. This is 35 minutes. Which I noticed because I said, I have a half an hour to watch it.
Right, yes.
And then I had to skip Amazulus to not keep you guys waiting. But it's like it didn't end because anything's resolved. It ended because we're out of time.
And to me, that's what makes this episode in particular, but the series in general, additionally timeless. Because to go with the time theme, because that's how we increasingly are watching TV in little segments. Even if it's a series we really like, I'll use Saturday Night Live as a 90-minute show. I don't know the last time I've watched the 90-minute version of Saturday Night Live. I come the next morning, do the clip, and that's all I'm going to see.
I go on Hulu and zip
yeah. But the point is that our sensibilities are trained so that we're looking for the self-contained. We're looking for, I get that point. And the thing is, the points being made in the series are pretty timeless. I mean, slapstick is timeless. A broad comedy is timeless. But some of the political undercurrents are pretty timeless as well.
Yeah, it's true. Because as topical as you get, the same patterns evolve. They'll always be liberals, they'll always be conservatives, they'll always be fascists. The names change, but the themes really don't. And honestly, I'm starting to like this episode a lot more. How you liked it more on the rewatch, but I'm liking it more. Yeah. I'm liking it more from this conversation because it's called time, and yet we're talking about how timeless it is. Well, but speaking of history, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, man. I got a quick point, and we were talking about this where in now the same vein of talking about like the realm of time, right? I remember John and I being in our 20s in college, watching this show, fucking loving it. Like, what the hell was this show? And it's like, is there any more of this? And it was amazing. I'm actually glad because the thing is, we saw it in the 90s. I wonder if we would have seen it in the 80s, 10 years earlier, where we probably would have been at that point somewhere between 12 and 14 years of age, somewhere like that, ballpark. I wonder if we would have liked the show as much, or if it would have made such an impact on us as it did, seeing it in our 20s as opposed to seeing it when we would have been 12 or 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, I think this show is more about the age you are than the time it was made. I think you're right, Howie. Had I seen this, because I do remember like seeing an episode of Blackadder when I was 15 and didn't really resonate with me, but then in college it did. I don't remember seeing the young ones at all in the 80s. And I think I might have just thought it was crazy and might have chalked it up to being foreign, and then passed on. But that's a great segue.
Look at those puppets, look at that SPG. I would remember him.
It's a great segue because, Wally, I wanted to wrap things up with this now that we finished the episode. Being the expert on the history of television, is the young ones, we know it's not remembered in the way that something like Seinfeld is, or Monty Python, even a British show.
Three's Company.
Is it an interesting, if you had to place this in your book, is it an interesting footnote, or is it something that's influential, that where you can say, I can follow the tracks of this? How important is this show to the history of television?
It would be not influential, but illustrative. That is, it's something that can transcend its times. Because the way I and my writing partner, Harry Castleman, look at the story of television, it's very often about the genres, the stories being told, and they're being told no matter what era it is. And so if you are looking at this particular series, you're looking at it as historical, namely with the performers involved, the talent behind it, the execution, the timelessness of slapstick and broad comedy. And we're going back more than 100 years. We're going pre-television to appreciate what they're doing. So it is not influential, but it is illustrative of what works with the right audience at the right time. Well, we're at the right time right now.
I think that's a great way to wrap this up. And you know what? If you thought that was as poignant as I did, you can read a whole book that Wally's written about this. Wally, how do we find Watching TV? Is the third edition still available?
Third edition is still available, and you want to go buy it, you can more than welcome to. You notice I have under my name watchingtv.org. If you go there, you'll get ordering information for the forthcoming fourth edition, which will be out later this year in the late fall. And that'll take the story of television from the beginning up until now. And if I do say so myself, I think it's very well written, entertaining, engaging, etc. But I have to say that. That's what they go for.
Well, what I've read.
Why you got to sit there? I read this book. It's 600 pages. It sucks. I
don't want to scare people away. It's very digestible, very user friendly. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. So you can find Watching TV. Wally, thank you so much for coming on. I think this is a perspective we haven't had before. The next episode we are doing is Sick. We have 2 left.
Ooh,
and
that's a good one.
And I'm looking forward to that one because our guest will be Mike Drucker, who is a writer of Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon and old friend of mine that I knew from my stand-up days. And and he can't wait to be on, and we can't wait to talk to him. But we are so grateful that we got to talk to Wally.
Thank you, Wally, so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation and glad to share in the experience.
And if you want to listen to these shows early, please subscribe to us wherever you get podcasts. We're on the Radio Misfits Network, which is where Cafe Comics always was. If you want to see our shining faces as we laugh at each other's jokes, you wait 1 week, and the Old Young Ones channel is available on YouTube. So you can see us and hear us, but you got to wait 7 days to do both. And with that, we will talk to you in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everyone. Because we may not be the young ones very long.